nearly 15 to 20% of children 5 and under dying of diarrheal disease.
I was just walking around actually Sese Beach the other day, and it's horrifying because you see, the locals praying to the ocean, and then they're praying and amongst all this plastic, and it's much worse than it used to be.
It's much worse.
Hi everyone, and welcome to the Conscious Rising podcast. Today we're really lucky to have on the show Christine Manson, the legendary founder of Terra Water.
I'd like to think that anybody would take me as seriously as any man. Don't look at me as a woman, but see the potential of my business, and I can show them the numbers.
Yeah. Terra Water is revolutionizing how we hydrate, regenerate, and reconnect with the earth.
Water is a basic human right, and people should have access, and they should be able to decentralize it and get it when they need it.
Christine is on a mission to turn water into a movement, one that restores not just our bodies, but our relationship with the planet.
The roots of Balinese culture is this idea of Trihita Karana, which is this connection to like earth, spirit, God. There's water temples everywhere in Bali. Water has always been used as a purification method. It's life. Like life is in water.
Christine, welcome to the show. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
We're in beautiful Bali. Tell me, have you been surfing today?
I did not surf today. I usually like to surf on Friday mornings, but we've had a really weird climate year, as you may know. So the waves really haven't been up to par.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
I do. So what do you do when you don't surf?
It's Bali. There's a Pilates class around every corner.
Great. Well, I hope the surf picks up.
Yes.
So, Christine, you're actually American, but you came to Bali. What inspired you to set up Terra Water here?
It's a long story, but my background's in the humanitarian sector, and I had been working in development abroad most of my career anyway, and had just returned to the States and was working with the American Red Cross, which was a job that I loved, but I was under-resourced and overworked, and so I took a sabbatical. It was meant to be a 1-year sabbatical, and then I would go back to the States and work for Red Cross again. But as I started traveling, I just started to see so much more that I thought I could contribute. And I started in the Americas and then worked my way over to Asia. 1 year turned into 2, and Bali was the last place on the list. Not for any particular reason. It just seemed like the furthest destination, but I was just blown away by this place.
And this is how far back?
This was in 2018.
Okay.
And I think I came during rainy season, and if you know anything about the geography of Indonesia, they use a subak system, and you can see it really well in Bali if you look at aerial footage, but we have these rivers that flow out to the sea. And back when we had just organic waste, that made sense. It made sense to have organic waste go into the rivers and then flow out to the sea. But now we have so much plastic waste. So much so that Indonesia is the second largest marine plastic polluter on the planet.
I was just walking around actually Sese Beach the other day, and I was just absolutely horrified about how much plastic, but not just plastic bottles, I don't know how it gets shredded. There's plastic labels, everything in the mix, in the sand. And it's horrifying because you see, the locals praying to the ocean, and then they're praying and amongst all this plastic.
Yes.
And it's much worse than it used to be.
It's much worse. And it's partly because Indonesia doesn't have really good management systems in place to deal with waste. So that was my first impression of Bali. And I hadn't really been in the water sector per se before that, but I had been working in humanitarian development, and obviously water and health are a huge part of that. And so the plastic waste was by far the thing that caught my attention. But when I started to look into the humanitarian need for drinking water in Indonesia, the statistics are reported that nearly 15 to 20% of children 5 and under dying of diarrheal disease. And so you start to think, well, so how do people get safe drinking water here? They buy it in plastic bottles, which we've now seen all over the beaches and into our oceans, or they boil it. But families that boil don't boil long enough. And you've got to boil water for over a minute for it actually to kill all of the dangerous bacteria that make you sick. Families don't want to drink boiling water. Even when you make coffee or tea, you heat it up. You don't want it actually boiling. So they bring it to a boil, they turn it right off. And then you go into the villages, and in some cases, they're drinking water directly. They don't even boil it.
Wow.
So I started digging into this sort of humanitarian need, and it became really apparent to me that there were two distinct market opportunities for drinking water in Indonesia. Commercial market, where plastic water bottles are becoming a problem, and the social market, where families just don't have access to safe drinking water because they're uneducated or they just don't have time or the knowledge to boil. So I left, I went back to the States, and I thought, gosh, I've got an option here. Like, do I jump into something like this, and what is the solution? Or do I go back and, to the job that may have been waiting for me? And I knew about this filter technology, having lived and worked in Central America for nearly a decade doing humanitarian work. And what I saw in the Indonesian market was a product like this didn't exist yet, but there was a huge need for it. And so I had to kind of dig my heels in and say, well, is this a product Indonesians would use? So I spent 7 months studying the technology and studying the market, writing myself a business plan, the whole thing. And I moved back here and started Terra. Took me about a year to get the business up and running. And we've been in operation now for 5 years.
Is Terra a B Corp, a nonprofit, or is it for profit?
Social enterprise. So we have a hybrid business model in that we have a for-profit business, but we also have a foundation. And some of our donors and CSR partners prefer to work with the foundation, and so we have that there. But actually, many of them are happy to work with the business, and it doesn't matter to us either way. We're doing the social good. So we're a social enterprise that does all of we give our own foundation money based on our own profits, but then we also run the foundation separately.
Interesting that it doesn't really matter for some of your partners.
Yeah.
But I guess for you, it's just revenue or support, and it's the same output almost?
It's the same output. Yeah. I mean, these hybrid models are really interesting in that grants are better for if you have a foundation, right? You're more likely to get grants. But some of our CSR partners have been really big, like tobacco companies. And we have partners in the industry that it's a conflict of interest. They wouldn't work with a tobacco company. But the way we look at it is, look, if they've got farmers who are working for them and they need water, why wouldn't we be there to get them water? So one of the tobacco companies that we've worked with preferred to work with the for-profit company. And one of the things they said is they don't trust nonprofits. They don't trust the financial responsibility of a nonprofit. And so it doesn't matter to us. We're manufacturing the filters and we're doing the project anyway.
Amazing. So that was back in 2018, 2019. And
started Terra then. Mm-hmm.
And then how big is the company now?
So 2018 is when I moved here. We launched in the middle of COVID. So July 2020.
Pleasure.
Yes.
Everyone.
But it was serendipitous because this technology was invented to fit a humanitarian need. It was actually invented in a hurricane in Central America where there was tons of standing water, but you couldn't drink it. People were boiling, but again, not boiling long enough. And if you've ever responded to a disaster from an aid organization's perspective, you know that water bottles are a disaster within a disaster. So what happens is these aid organizations ship containers of bottled water, and now you've got a plastic problem. So this doctor in Central America invented this technology, and the idea was that you could use natural raw materials almost anywhere in the world, and you could make a ceramic pot that was porous. And the idea was that the pore sizes are smaller than bacteria and parasites. So if you put that dirty water into the pot, those microorganisms get stuck in the filter membrane, and then all of the clean water drips through. So ideally, you could make these anywhere in the world and for almost nothing, where people needed safe drinking water. So we started making these filters right away. It was COVID. There were families struggling that were buying water in gallons in the plastic bottles before COVID, but then couldn't afford them anymore. So it was serendipitous because we jumped in with the humanitarian need, but it also gave us an opportunity to do these micro sort of market studies. So we'd get filters into the families of these Balinese families who were struggling during COVID. And we were able to ask them questions like, how much money are you making? Where do you get your water from now? So to really investigate that kind of like cradle to delivery, what does that household look like from a drinking water perspective? How much are they spending? How much time is this detracting from women's opportunities to get work? And in many cases, it was. The average family during COVID in Bali was making $125 a month. So you can imagine why they couldn't afford water anymore. So we got all this great market research. We tested our logo and all of our branding colors and things like that, and how to communicate this technology in Bahasa versus English, because, there's a very niche cultural element here in terms of how they talk about terracotta and clay. And then we started to see this pull from the everyday household and business asking to buy our filters. And we knew that would happen. So behind the scenes, we were working with suppliers to make our containers. And we now have a beautiful container. We call it our ceramic series, but it's a beautiful piece of ceramic. The filter drops inside of it. Whereas with the social programs, we're using, basically it's a 5-gallon bucket, which is what the filters were designed to fit in. And it's exactly the same technology. And the families are only paying for the container, for the aesthetics. So we had that product ready to rock and roll during COVID, when other families were kind of like seeing our product around. And so we were able to kind of simultaneously launch the social and the commercial business at the same time in 2020.
Incredible. But it's not necessarily new technology, right? You're just reappropriate or repackaging existing technology.
That's right.
Make it more efficient.
It's actually open source technology.
Right.
So Dr. Mazariegos invented it 40 years ago and refused to put patents. He just said, if you can find clay, you should be able to make these filters. So obviously we've had to protect certain elements of how we operate in Indonesia, very volatile and corrupt country, but also lots of opportunity and lots of copycats. So we found other creative ways to protect our IP, our know-how. But theoretically, anybody could make these.
And are these filters just for, say, communities in Bali, or are they for people living in Singapore, or people living in the city? Like, how effective are they?
Yeah, it's surprising because, so I bootstrapped this company myself. I felt like I needed proof of concept before we could really blow this thing up. And 5 years in, we've been making our money for the last 3 years.
Making no money.
We've been making our own money.
Your own money.
Yep. We've been running the business ourselves.
Right.
So we've taken no outside investment. And to have that kind of confidence to build this, and there's no proof of concept in a product like this without building a factory, making the product, and then selling it. And so it was really risky. But I did a lot of research, and I look at markets, and Indonesian culture is drawn to this idea of traditional technologies, but also like keeping tradition alive. And I think, we use terracotta clay. And if you look at Indonesian history over the last 2,500 years, there's been a terracotta vessel that's been used for drinking for that long. So I had this really good feeling that the technology would work. And so I researched all the other water filters out there. I mean, now that I know that I have a problem, plastic bottles, drinking water in the villages, I needed a solution. And I investigated every water filter type. And I tell you what, across the board, worldwide, there is no better filter for the price point. It just doesn't exist. And one of the most beautiful things about this technology is people are always looking for new tech. They're investing in new tech. They're looking for faster, cheaper ways of doing things. We are using a nature-based solution that uses raw materials from the earth, that's using a technology that the earth was designed to do itself. And we've modernized it, and we're marketing it, and we've commercialized it, and it's selling without having to reinvent the wheel.
Typically, how much would they sell for? Just so the listeners have an idea. Like, some people might have a Kangen.
Yeah.
It's very expensive.
Yes. And I think that's the idea. So going back to the technology, like the filters work, right? So they take out all of the yucky stuff. They make 100% safe drinking water. And whether you're buying the $27 version, which is what we donate to the villages, or the $700 version, which is our copper filter that we've just launched, It's actually the same filter inside. So it's exactly the same technology. You're getting the safe drinking water, whether you can only afford $27 or $700. And so we've now been selling our filters in relatively every single market in all of Indonesia. So we have celebrities and high net worth individuals, Indonesian, in Jakarta that are, and we're not marketing to them, that are just buying the product. But then we also have CSR and nonprofit organizations buying the product for social programs, and then everything in the middle. So mom and pop cafes in Canggu, big box hotels, the Bengkel, the car and bike mechanic in Warong on the side of the road. Because the value proposition of these filters is it's got all of the sort of natural local stuff going, the sort of cultural familiarity, but they're saving everybody time and money. And I think that's where sort of the light bulb goes off. Like, we don't even have to sell these filters, because when you crunch the numbers, we've seen that you're paying off about 2 years of water in about 3 months, even if you buy our mid to most expensive level filters.
Incredible.
So if you can come up with the funds up front, then you're good to go for 2 years.
That's incredible. Yeah. Tell us a little bit about how serious this plastic problem is. I mean, we see stats every day, like it's a $1.5 trillion issue that needs to be solved. I mean, there's more plastic by volume in the ocean than sea animals in 10 years or something ridiculous. I mean, how bad is it?
It's bad enough that the multinational organizations are starting to create some rules around what's allowed. We've seen that the World Bank in particular, their goal for Indonesia is a 70% reduction by 2030. That's in 5 years. And right now there's no plan to do anything about the plastic, right? We're not taxing water bottles more. We're not introducing nature-based solutions or promoting them more. So something has to change. I don't know what the penalty is going to be if they can't do this in 5 years, but you see organizations that are following these trends and they're working around, and you also can look at the consumer markets and see that actually people are demanding, they're demanding different products. And so the plastic problem is bad enough. It's destroying our fishing industry. It's destroying tourism. People are paying more and more attention to microplastics, and in the back of my mind, I think, well, who's paying attention to microplastics? It's educated people. That's not true. My Balinese neighbors who are making minimum wage in Bali are talking about things like microplastics. So, the health implications of having plastic around us as much as we are coming to light. So the plastic issue is a real issue, and we want to be positioned when the government does pay attention and wants to support and promote companies that are eliminating plastic. So we don't even reduce plastic. We're not even talking about plastic reduction. You use our filter, you never need to buy plastic ever again. And so there's all these other workarounds, but then there's also just eliminating plastic. And so we're trying to get in with a lot of those partners to position ourselves in a place when they're ready to push the button, we're there. And we've done a lot of that work over the last year.
Do your filters get rid of the microplastics in the water?
Yes.
Wow.
Many of them. Yep.
Wow.
So the average microplastic, I mean, average is a tough word because now nanoplastics are coming to light, and they're even smaller. And there's no filter in the world, I think, that gets rid of nanoplastics, even RO systems. But microplastics are like 0.04 microns and up, generally speaking. Our pore size is 0.02. So filters take out most microplastics.
Incredible.
Yeah.
They say, I mean, the study showing that the microplastics are in our cord blood. It's in our brain. It's getting through the blood-brain barrier.
Yep.
It's in our testicles for men.
Yep.
It's right through us. What we put out in the environment comes right back in. And
Absolutely.
as above, so below, as within, so without, right? It's this reciprocity, which we seem to have a hard time understanding as humans on this planet.
Totally.
So it's more than just about having clean water, isn't it? It's about how we just have a lack of respect for this miracle molecule that essentially it underpins all of life. And yet we just kind of just think of it as some sort of never-ending resource.
Yeah. And I think there's two camps. There's camps that say in a really good rainy season, the water table completely replenishes, which may be true, which is great. That means we have enough water. There's other camps that say there's just no way. Because what's happening is, as we've seen in places like Bali, there's so much development that, a lot of these businesses are, number one, they have 200 hotel rooms and people take showers all day. And then there's AC units and then there's a pool that they have to maintain. And if everybody does that, plus every villa in Bali, it doesn't matter if that water table is replenishing. Like eventually it's too much. There's an excess of use. And so one thing I find absolutely fascinating about this technology, so going back to studying the technology at its roots in Central America, the company that's operating there had a third-party study done on cradle to delivery. What does a plastic water bottle company use in CO2 and carbon emissions and in water versus a filter factory like mine for the same amount of water? 600 times more water needed in a water bottle factory to make the plastic and the little tops and to fill them up with 500 liters of water than for my filters to make the same amount of water, and 100 times more CO2.
That's great.
It's insane. And all they're doing is using the same water you put in my filter. They're just putting it in a plastic water bottle, and then they're marketing it as the safest alternative to drinking water, when actually it's not safe. You look at studies, Indonesia is like 5th on the list in terms of microplastics and coliforms still found in sealed plastic water bottles. So you're not getting a better product. You're actually getting a worse product. But they've got so much marketing money, and many water bottle companies are owned by these huge conglomerates that are operating worldwide, and they're just going to win every time. And that's the battle we're against.
This is a public good, right? So isn't the government supporting you, or shouldn't it be supporting you?
The government's goals around water, and this is actually worldwide, so not to kind of, pinpoint Indonesia, but is access to water. And access is defined as, can a family get water within the vicinity of their home? And why is that important? It's important because we can live without food, but we can't live without water, right? It's important because we start to look at economic value loss when predominantly worldwide women are responsible for water. So if they're spending up to 4 hours a day fetching firewood, fetching water, bringing it home, and boiling it, that woman is now, what is she doing for her family? She could have had a job. She could be pulling in her own income. She could be educating herself or her children. And so the economic value lost in seeking water sources is in the billions of dollars. So Indonesia's goals around water are access to water. So what they're doing is they're really promoting piped water, because that's something they can do. It's a utility, right? So the Department of Public Works is responsible for water in Indonesia, if you can believe it. And then they're drilling wells wherever that makes sense, and they are installing rain catchment wherever that makes sense. But mostly they're looking at piped water. So that means if you can get water near the household, the family is still responsible for purifying it and making it clean, but no one's responsible for that. No one in Indonesia, no government organization promotes what we call WASH, which is water sanitation and hygiene. So you can give people all the water you want, but if those babies are drinking that water directly, they're still dying. Indonesia is the second largest country in the world for childhood stunting. And that's due partly to malnutrition, but it doesn't matter if you have all the best food in the world. If you have chronic diarrhea, you're not going to retain those essential nutrients to grow. So we're working with UNICEF. We're working with what was USAID. We're working with a lot of the big multinationals that are in the water space. So United Nations Environmental Program obviously is invested in getting plastic off the islands. So there's a lot of really great multinationals out there, but they don't often have budgets for the kind of boots on the ground work. And where we can, we work with them to do social projects. But at the end of the day, to proliferate this technology, it really comes back to business, just good old-fashioned business. We're a home goods product. So if we can make a really beautiful, locally made water filter that competes with existing water sources, so water bottles, at a price point or at an aesthetics point, then we can get this product everywhere we need to, from the big cities to the last mile. And so that's our business model. We're not relying on the big multinational partners to help us get this technology out there. We're counting on good old fashioned marketing and selling this product as a home goods product. And then creating an aspirational, good looking product where people can they're proud to have this in their home.
Let's talk a little bit about the quality of water again, because, as you say, like, people get a clear plastic bottle of water, they think it's clean, they think it's good for you because that's the way, you think it's clear, and you're thinking, oh, it must be fresh. But of course, it's not necessarily good for you. Remineralized water, distilled water, there's a whole bunch of problems with that kind of water that you're drinking. It's not necessarily hydrating you in the way that good, clean, fresh water would.
Absolutely.
But what your filters are doing is you're taking like standard tap water, and then just filtering all the bad stuff out of it.
Correct.
And so technically you should be getting a better product than if you bought a bottle of water. Yeah.
So most piped water, most tap water in Indonesia is well water. It's about 70%. And then the other 40% is that piped water, which still comes from the ground, but it goes through a facility that puts like chlorine and fluoride in it, like we would have in our countries. It's still not safe to drink, though.
Wow.
The good news is both of those sources still have the minerals inside.
Okay.
So you're getting the minerals from the earth, which is the best source. If we all ate like we did thousands of years ago, and it was all fruits and veg and, meat that we caught with our hands, we'd be getting all of the essential minerals and nutrients we need for our body, but we don't. We eat garbage now. And in a lot of places in the world, that mineral content comes from drinking water. So then if you start getting people to drink out of plastic all the time, it doesn't have that same mineral content. Plus, again, like you said, we don't know what those microplastics are doing. It could be contradicting all of that. You need some of these minerals to match up to actually absorb those better. Like magnesium is an absorbing mineral, right? It allows your body to absorb things like calcium. If you take out the magnesium in water, like in bottled water, then it doesn't matter how much milk you drink. If you're a milk drinker, then you're not going to get that calcium. So these filters are great at taking out the bad stuff and leaving in the good stuff. And I find that it makes the water taste better as well. I find that it keeps the water cooler, which is really interesting as well. And so there's so many different water bottle companies out there. I mean, some are better than others. Some do have mineralized water, which is fine. But I think when you remineralize the water, who knows what's really happening to that water. A lot of them take the water out because, like, coffee machines and a lot of machines that require piping. So like those hot cold dispensers require piping, espresso machines. They don't want calcium in the water because it gets that crystallized calcium carbonate on it. So most coffee shops will buy sort of dead water that doesn't taste like anything, doesn't have any minerals in it. But actually the coffee doesn't taste better. It's just better for the pipes. Coffee's best when it has minerals in it because it enhances all these flavors. So much cool stuff. Yeah.
So I have to find a coffee shop in Bali that has
a Terra filter.
A Terra filter. Is there someone I can find out that information?
So we have a few on our website and our Instagram.
I'll check those out.
We should probably promote them better than we do.
Yeah, I definitely go. So Dr. Mazuru Emoto, he famously did experiments on water crystals, and people might have seen them all over Instagram or on the web, but basically he did these experiments where if you sent water molecules high vibration, love energy, the crystals would be more like snowflakes. Yeah. If you sent them shame, anger, bitterness, the crystals would deform. That kind of lends itself to this idea that water is a living molecule. It's not just water as we think of it's inert. It actually is it has a memory to it, or it's affected by frequency.
Yeah.
Is there any sense that your water filters are sort of retaining that more of the wholeness of the water molecule versus, say, plastic bottled water or some of this distilled water?
I'd like to think so.
Yeah.
I don't, maybe there's a way to study that. If you were to look at the structure of the water, I guess under a microscope, as he has done, that'd be super curious to see what it looks like, our water versus a plastic water. I think one thing that alludes to that is this idea of the Trihita Karana in Bali. So the Balinese culture, the roots of Balinese culture is this idea of Trihita Karana, which is this connection to like earth, spirit, God, and there's water temples everywhere in Bali. Water has always been used as a purification method. It's life. Like life is in water, and it, whether that's the structure or whether that's the microorganisms in the water or the essential minerals, I don't know what that is, but it's such a huge part of Balinese culture that, we've often thought, gosh, we need to do a really cool marketing thing here, maybe with one of the water priests, and just have him talk a little bit about that, because I think it'd be fascinating.
Again, there's a slight disconnect there because water was the original concept of the religion here, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. There's the disconnect that one of the biggest sources of trash, as we mentioned before, is that the villagers will throw the trash into the water system, which then flows down to the ocean. How do we, because there's been a lot of education, and I don't want to get political about it, but like, how do we shift that or reconnect that connection? Because it seems bizarre.
Let me tell you this crazy story. So when I first moved here, before like Terra, I came here to start Terra, right? But I was like volunteering with all the organizations, and Trash Hero was already on the island. This was before Sungai Watch existed. Sungai Watch and I started around the same time. And they're buddies. We're partners. They make products for us. So I go out with Trash Hero, and I'm doing these beach cleanups. And the lovely thing about Trash Hero is they're locally driven. So they usually have like a banjar, a Balinese banjar that kind of hosts it. And then the Trash Hero team comes, and then they promote it, and people like me come. And we were doing these beach cleanups, and instead of picking up the plastic, like the candy wrappers and water bottles, they'd pick up the leaves and the sticks and all the organic waste.
Yeah.
And if you've driven through Balinese villages, you see them sweeping up, like they pick up every flower. And I was like, that doesn't register as trash. Like the inorganic stuff didn't register as trash. And so there's this huge education that has to be done.
Right.
But there's some really great groups now that are doing this. Like Balinese government's a bit more progressive, and so they're really trying to get this education into the schools and into homes. And there's some cute little nonprofits that are doing the same thing. But boy, did that blow my mind.
Yeah, you see it writ large when you go up into the villages, and I guess it's like how can we honor water not just as a utility? I think this is the problem. We see it as a utility. It is a utility in most countries, right? But more as a sacred ally for our longevity in these times of planetary crisis. I mean, it's how do we make that shift globally, not just here in Bali?
It's a fascinating question, and I think you have to know who your market is. And in Bali, the cultural stuff really works. And so, I have a lot of Balinese friends and colleagues who they actually would prefer to use my filter because they don't like the idea of plastic. Again, and they're talking about microplastics. They still go to what they call the beji, which is the spring. They collect the water, and many of them still drink it directly because it's considered holy. It's the same water that we're piping up and going into our tap, which is full of coliform. It's not pure water. It's still disgusting and unsafe. But their beliefs around those holy springs are so strong that they drink it directly. Yeah. So then, in Bali, we have an opportunity to kind of market the spiritual side of things. But in places like Jakarta, I mean, I'm sure through your podcast and your work, like you start to look at things like a carbon tax and green taxes, and how do you incentivize B2B and B2C to make better decisions? And you can only do that by if things are either scarce or they're more expensive. So there has to be an incentive somehow. And I think this is where Bali's talked about banning single-use plastic bottles. I don't think that would work, but I think if you tax them, if you said, well, these are now 30% more expensive, people would stop buying them.
Yeah.
And they'd start to look for other solutions.
Absolutely.
But you're fighting against not the government, you're fighting against big multinationals that would never let that happen.
Let's talk a little bit about tourism, over tourism. Again, Bali in the hot seat here. The development is probably the fastest you'll see anywhere in the world. I mean, every time I come back, there's more villas, more shops, and it's just, the rice paddies are disappearing at the speed of knots. So, where's the balance, right? It's a beautiful paradise. People want to come here. People should come here, and yet we see this juxtaposition of incredible waste, plastic problem. And in places like Uluwatu, literally the water's running out, right? They have to ship water down there by truck. So, what do you think is the right balance? How do you...
I think there has to be scarcity for the businesses to be incentivized to use alternative sources of water. And right now they're not. The big water companies are subsidized. They have delivery. They don't have to think about it. They've always paid those fees. And the tourists, if it's out of sight, out of mind, they don't really care. So something has to happen. There has to be a trigger. There has to be scarcity. In Uluwatu, there's a water mafia because they don't have groundwater there. There's too much limestone and they don't get a lot of rainfall. So they actually get their water trucked in those gigantic tanks that go on the roof. And there's only a few different companies, families that do that. And they're very competitive and it's very price competitive too. And so, that's one way to do it is like, okay, well, I don't want to work with the mafias, but then what are you going to build your own like rain catchment system on your roof? Well, yes, that's what some people have done. And it's brilliant because now you don't have to rely on anybody.
Yeah.
And I think as Indonesia, it's the fastest growing emerging economy in Southeast Asia. It's the biggest in the whole region. It's the 7th largest economy in terms of GDP. There's tons of disposable income here. What we're seeing is people want decentralized solutions. They don't want to have to participate in the big players. They don't want to have to buy from the guys who own the mafias. And that's where products like ours come in because once you have a water filter, if you can find water, it's all yours. That water is yours. And so working with rain catchment companies would be great because then you're catching the rain, you're filtering it yourself. You don't need anybody. And it's nice to think, in social systems, it's nice to think you can rely on those support systems, but in a place like Indonesia, you can't. So it's kind of it's a little every man for himself. And so I think something has to happen for the tourists to pay attention, and that'll trigger the businesses to pay attention. Or the government just has to start taxing.
I've often thought a good way of addressing this would to create like a volunteer system. I don't know if there is the one that exists, but as a tourist to come here, you have to spend X amount of hours helping clean the beach or do some sort of voluntary service.
Yeah.
Do you think that'll ever happen? A green service.
Yeah.
Or you might get discounts or something if you participate.
That would be amazing. Yeah, if you could prove you did it, I know. That, one idea I had was there was when I first moved here, there was a company that had an app, and it was called Refill My Bottle. I tried to buy the app from him. He wouldn't sell it to me. He should have because it's been obsolete for 2 years. Maybe he'd sell it to me now, but he's also lost all his customers. But the idea was that if Bali ever got to a point where they banned single-use plastic, which they keep claiming they're going to do, then when you come in at the airport, there's one of those big banners and you have to scan it. You have to download the app and you can buy a water bottle right there, or you can buy it in town, a refill of one, and you have to refill your bottle. And nobody's going to lose business because the businesses can still charge for the gallon water.
Yeah.
They just won't sell the plastic single-use ones. So you'd have to require that. Like you can't let people in without it. That's an idea, but then again, you're now dealing with the business owners and the water bottle company.
So where do you see the future of Terra 5-10 years down the line? Is this going to be a global product? Is it going to be in every household in Indonesia?
That would be great. Going back to the technology and its scalability in terms of kind of market share, I think it has the potential to be really huge. And that's what I would want for this. Not because I'm in it for, I need to run a big home goods company, but because water is a basic human right and people should have access and they should be able to decentralize it and get it when they need it. And so the company is Terra Water Indonesia. There's 275 million people in this country, spread out over 17,000 islands is how many we have, but the inhabited is something like 10,000. That's a lot of geography. So we're looking at our urban operations, commercial operations being in like Sumatra and Java, which by 2030 will have 77% of the population. And then a lot of our social programs are in East Indonesia, where there's huge needs for water. And then if it made sense to scale this technology in the region where, Myanmar and Malaysia and Vietnam have similar water problems and similar markets, which they do, then that's on the table. Because it's a nature-based solution, because it's a scalable green technology, because everything that they would need to build one of these companies is right there, we can absolutely do that. So that's what I hope we can achieve over the next 10 years. And then come out with really cool container designs so that we can truly scale that price point. Because the idea being, again, that you could have really beautiful, high-end, artisanal versions, limited edition series, all the way down to something that a family living at the last mile that would have been boiling can afford. Then everybody has exactly the same quality water.
Great. This is about conscious capitalism, this podcast. So you're a conscious entrepreneur. Let's talk a little bit about the challenges you face. I mean, it's hard enough running a business for profit. It's even harder running a purposeful business or a nature first business.
Yeah.
Tell us, maybe give us some examples of like big impasses or problems that you've kind of had to navigate around. And we can talk then a little bit about the mindset that it takes to be a conscious entrepreneur.
Yeah. One of the very specific to my business challenges that we face is that when you work with something like a nature-based solution, there's nothing formulaic about nature. Not every caterpillar looks the same. So not every vein of clay looks the same. And so if we want to scale our technology on really mass scales, we're reconciling with the fact that every land of clay that we find is very different and it has different properties. And we have to adjust the way we manufacture that product because of that. And again, 17,000 islands, who knows what we're going to find, right? Theoretically, the whole country has clay, but it's not all the same.
And you don't source it from the same places, like you're sourcing it locally from each island or from each.
Do you know that's the best case scenario because then it's circular economy.
Yeah.
And you keep everything as local as absolutely possible. Local materials, local labor, natural product. When you're done with our filter in 2 years, you can literally break it up and put it in your garden. You could put a plant in it. You do whatever you want. So we like that circular economy model. So we'd like to keep that as close as possible to where we're operating. So that's a big one because we have to be able to standardize our materials as much as possible to be able to scale. And so that's specific to our technology and our manufacturing. Other challenges are, and I'm sure that every enterprise that aims to be truly sustainable struggles with this, but there's a cost benefit that isn't short term. It's long term. And I think, organizations like Patagonia saw this, where short term they knew, they were like, okay, we need organic cotton. That's our first priority. Well, organic cotton meant that they had to find it in India. And when they found it in India, then they were using factories that had child labor in India. And they were like, well, shit, we can't do that. And so then you start to think, well, so now we're paying more for organic cotton, but we're compromising this other thing that's also really important to us. So you have to really balance. You almost have to choose, what do we care most about? And that goes hand in hand with your mission as a company, but also your market. What is your market asking for? Like, does your market care about child labor or do they care about organic cotton? And, for them, it was everything. They've done it all, which is why they're this incredible company that we put on a pedestal, because they have managed to do a lot. So you have to reconcile these things, and then there's going to be a cost to every decision you make. The studies are now showing that these pivots to using sustainable practices, solar power or hydropower or natural products, long term will actually make you money. It'll save costs and make money, but it's a long game. And a lot of companies that are looking to scale fast, they don't care. They're just at the expense of the earth, at the expense of people. They're just looking to make money.
Yeah.
And so we spend a lot of time thinking about what are the decisions we can make today? What are the decisions we can make in 5 years and in 10 years? Where does that leave us in terms of what kind of company we want to be? But also, what does our consumer care about? Why are people buying our filters? Are they buying them because they're pretty? Or are they buying them because they're natural? And we've actually found that like the natural side of things isn't the biggest reason, and neither is the social side of things, but it's important to us and it's the right thing to do. So we've made compromises. We've lost money because we're committed to those two things.
And that's the difference, isn't it? You're willing to lose profit for principle or purpose, and not many companies are.
No.
And you would probably go for a long-term, slower growth rate than 10xing at the expense of your principles, right?
Do you know what's funny, though, about like, going back to this technology? We are really lucky. Like the filter, because we won't change much about how we make the filter. In 100 years, when Terra is this massive Southeast Asian water company, we're still going to be making a filter that you can throw in your garden in 2 years. And whether we decide to make more plastic containers, which I don't love, but it's a cheap material, and if it means people are getting a safe product that they can compost at the end of that cycle, and then they can keep the plastic container for generations to come, we've made a compromise there, but we're still honoring the nature-based solution, the filter, and health. And so we're really lucky that our technology is doing like 80% of the work for us, and then that 20% is left on us to make decisions about. Do we use natural containers? Right now we're using copper, ceramic, enamel, and steel, which are all natural, but then we do have a plastic one. But because we can't find a material cheap enough to get that price point right, so that the families that can't afford water can get our water.
Right.
So we're really lucky in that respect. But what I'd love to see happen is new innovative materials. Can we start to work with natural materials and scale them in such a way that they're food grade? They could be made in mass. Right now, that doesn't exist. I can't make a container out of wood. It's too porous. It's not safe. Stone's too heavy. Clay. We're using clay. A lot of companies now are melting down plastic and making furniture and stuff out of that, but it's highly toxic. They leach microplastics and chemicals. We can't make a water filter product out of that. So could we use mycelium? I mean, that's my dream. It's like, what can we use cassava? Right now you put water on cassava and it falls apart immediately. There's got to be something out there that we can make these containers from, that we could make at scale, that we could keep the price down, that are natural.
For the listeners out there, there's an opportunity.
Yes.
Dial into contact Christine if you have the answer.
Please.
I'm sure there is a solution. There's actually another entrepreneur I spoke to. She's doing mycelium-powered nappies for kids. Wow. And it's incredible how they're using this, natural solution to basically break down all the, the human product that we create.
It's perfect.
It's perfect. And it's just, why didn't one think of this?
I know. That's it.
And again, a female founder took a woman's insight and instinct. Do you think that being a female entrepreneur gives you a bit more of a long-term approach, a bit more holistic approach? Is it fair to say? Or are you making decisions differently than, we don't want to be so gender specific.
Yeah.
It's an old hat, but how does that give you your particular edge?
Yeah. It's a good question. And I don't like to live too much in that world because I have, So I mentioned that I bootstrapped Terra. I'm fundraising now.
Mm.
And I will say raising capital has been a rude awakening. 2% of all VC capital is given to women entrepreneurs. 2%. That's it. So is my approach more holistic? Is it better? Is it worse? Some studies have said women entrepreneurs are better because they consider the human as well as the operational element of building a business. Their teams may be stronger. There may be more communication, more sort of an open door policy, if you will. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what product we're making, we're managing people.
Yeah.
That's a business. A business, you don't have a business if you don't manage people. And so I'd like to think that anybody would take me as seriously as any man. And I've turned away money because I don't like the way someone's talking to me.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
I like that.
So, my door is open. I would love to connect with people who don't look at me as a woman, but see the potential of my business, and I can show them the numbers.
Yeah.
And I've taken it this far, and I have no doubt we'll take it to the end.
Do you find there's any discrimination against you being a blonde American in Indonesia?
Never discriminated against. In fact, I have never been more respected, I think, as a woman. Women in Indonesia, we have this reputation. We're a Muslim country, and I think there's this idea that Islam in particular doesn't empower women. Indonesia is incredibly progressive. There's so many women in power in here. My company has women in management. Many companies I know have women in management. So I actually find that the women, so in order to have women in those positions, you have to have men who treat them as equals. And I have found time and time again that Indonesia doesn't discriminate. And I have been incredibly respected. Now, do I think I'm the person to scale this business on a national level long term? I don't think it matters how good my Bahasa is. I'm never going to relate to an Indonesian the same way that an Indonesian would. And that's just taking my ego out of it for a minute and saying there's probably someone better to represent us externally in Indonesia as we grow. And I'm looking for that person now. I want them to come in as my equal and help me scale this in a way that feels more culturally appropriate. I'm happy to be behind the scenes. And so, and I think that would be true. And I don't actually know if that would be true in America. I think America has had enough immigration that, anybody of any color could grow something. Indonesia hasn't really had that. It's still very nationalistic.
Yeah, so I think in terms of just wanted to break down your your way of doing business. Like, how do you make decisions? Are you an analytical person? Are you a instinctual decision maker? Like, what's your sort of way of making decisions and who you work with? Because you just said that, like, you won't let someone invest if you don't like the way they speak to you, which is that's great. Principled, and so. Can you give us any insight into how because you created a successful, purposeful business? It's not easy. What is your sort of secret sauce and how you do that?
I wouldn't say there's a secret. I think I go with a lot of intuition, and I'm very pragmatic.
Yeah.
I'm a bit of a slow decision maker. I mean, some people might call that risk averse, but with my vision for the company and the numbers we've crunched, there's no risk averse. I mean, I use my own money in a new country to start a business. So I'm clearly not risk averse.
Yeah.
But I am pragmatic in terms of I want to see the numbers and I want to see things, how things will go. I'm very calculated in that respect. But I think in terms of other decisions, I'm intuitive, but that intuition comes from observation. It comes from observing the market. There's other companies out there who are making these filters. It's open source technology. I study everything they do. I'm looking at their machine designs. I'm looking at their scalability. I'm looking at their market. I'm looking at how they're marketing. And I'm watching similar products in Indonesia. And I'm looking at who's their market? How are they marketing? What's working? What do their sales funnels look like? Are they doing commercials? Is it all Instagram? Is it TikTok Shop or is it Shopee? So I think I think this comes with experience and leadership. We often get judged on how much we do, and we rarely get judged on these simple decisions. And I don't know if it was Steve Jobs or Jeff Bezos said, I make 2 or 3 decisions in a day and that's it, because they're calculated and they're based on informed decision making. And so that's kind of my approach. And I think with that comes a lot of like mindfulness and checking in with myself. Like, are we aligned? And I don't like the way you're talking to me is a bit of a joke. It has happened on a single occasion, but more often than not, I turn away money or partners because we're not aligned on the mission. And we're so steadfast on what we care about. The fact that our product is nature-based, that we're sustainable, we're environmental, we have a social mission. We will help people get safe drinking water at the expense of the company making money. And if that doesn't work for you, then you're not meant to work with us. So that's just, it's a little bit of just, again, my experience and intuition, but observation.
And going back to your technology we talked a little bit about the different ways of filtering. Could 3D printing ever solve this? Like 3D printing containers or filters?
So yeah, what's funny is there was a student, I want to say she was at University of Berkeley in California. She was designing a 3D printer to print these filters, but this would have been 4 years ago.
Yeah.
And I never heard from her again.
Okay.
But I'm like, that's brilliant. They're not rocket science. It's a pot.
No.
There's definitely some existing technology out there we could use to optimize our manufacturing. So, as I start to look for investment, these will be some of the things that we put in as line items to invest in some of that machinery.
What's one thing that some of our listeners can do to improve the way that they have a relationship with water?
I think, going back to this idea of mindfulness and just checking in, there's maybe more of a movement around mindful eating or mindful thought. Water improves both of those. So it's a connector. And as you take a sip of water, if every time we took a sip of water, if we thought about where that water came from, and we remember that it is a scarce resource, like it won't last us forever, then we're more conscious of where our water comes from, and then it drives decision making. One thing I tell people in Bali is if you go into a restaurant and they only sell water on the menu in water bottles, I bet if you ask them to refill your refillable water bottle and pay the same price, because you're getting the same amount of water, I bet they'd do it. They're getting the money either way. So then they start to think, wow, so I could make money on that water and I don't even need to deal with the plastic bottles and the glass bottles afterwards. So you have a choice as a consumer to demand water, and no one's losing in that battle. But I think just being more mindful of this resource that takes up such a huge percentage of the earth, but even our own bodies.
Do you think that Bali is maybe a great place for conscious entrepreneurs or businesses because there are so many issues?
I think it is, but I think, if you look at the climate in Bali, it's tourism focused. And my filters actually aren't for tourists. I mean, they use them. And what's funny is we see a lot of people that rent like an Airbnb or a homestay for months at a time, and they buy our product for the homestay because they don't want to drink the plastic water. And I'm like, yes. So then, we get their manager, and then now we're making sales there. But so much of the conscious entrepreneur community here is, it's meditation, it's breath work, it's tourism focused, but it's not on the infrastructure, and we're infrastructure. And so it's not our market, although tourism drives the market because they also make decisions about where they eat and what products they use. So I think it is a good climate. And that's why I started in Bali, because even though Indonesians have been drinking out of ceramic vessels for 2,500 years, they're not used to using a water filter, like a purifier. They're used to plastic water, which has been highly promoted, marketed, or boiling. So we're looking at mass behavior change. And we'll end up doing that through marketing and selling our product as, a home goods product over time. But we have to train people that these filters are safe and that they can use it. And so I think that'll come with its own challenges, but the tourism sector will help us. And so we really actually have to get the product into the households and mom and pop shops to help drive that.
What would be the one message that you would have for, say, governments or corporations to improve this more secure or water secure future?
Yeah, just that it would help them achieve their goals faster. It would save the government money, and it would end up being billions of dollars in gained economic surplus because you're not dealing with the plastic waste or these manufacturing expenses. But they need to see the numbers. Yeah. We're not big enough yet where they can actually see the numbers on a mass scale. On the household level, on a business level, I can show you exactly how much money people are saving. I can tell you how much CO2 people are saving. For every single filter in use, it offsets 2.06 tons of CO2 over 2 years.
2.60 tons.
In 2 years.
2 years.
Yeah.
Because people don't think about the carbon footprint of that bottled water. They think it's just, it's water. It must be from around here. But it's being shipped all over the world. It's being the plastic that's used to create it. That's crazy.
Yeah. And that depends on where it's going too. Yeah. So it could be more, it could be less. But so we get families who donate to us. They're flying, kids are on spring break or summer break, and they go to Europe for the summer, and they're going to spend whatever amount on CO2. They donate money to my company in the amount of CO2 that they would offset, because they know that if they gave away 10 filters, that's 20 kilograms of CO2, right? So, we can be doing some carbon offset projects as well. Right now, we don't advertise those, but we get them all the time. And businesses do the same thing. Like, they're now taking out, 10 gallons in their kitchen of plastic water, but they're also offsetting 20 kilograms of CO2 every time.
That's a great message to get across. Yeah. Okay, so top 3 tips. This is just sort of rapid fire. Like, what would you say most important skill to be a conscious entrepreneur?
Oh, patience. Persistence. Stubbornness. Yeah.
Well, see it through.
That's right. You've got to be so committed to that mission. Like, if you start looking at the dollar signs, then you're willing to sacrifice all the wrong things. And so it's a long game. It really is a long game. The world will come around. I feel hopeful that the world will come around, and we'll start to see carbon taxes, or we'll start to see incentives for green projects. Indonesia's done one small thing, which is and maybe more now, but they're requiring businesses over a certain size have an ESG or a CSR program. And so with that is engaging in programs like mine. Now, if every company did that, or especially the big polluters like the palm industry and the textile, if they did that, man, we'd be in business. And I don't mean Terra, I just mean as a country, we'd be moving the needle in the right direction. So,
and as you mentioned, you're fundraising right now. What do you think is, for most people or potential investors, what's the main blockage here? Why wouldn't they invest? It seems like a slam dunk, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously the investment conversation is a different one, and it's polarized. Yeah. But there's institutional investing that is looking for quick and big returns, and we might have that because we're building a product that sells itself, and people want it, and our margins are good. But we wouldn't make the same money as we would if we didn't do the social stuff. And so the impact investors want to see more impact. The traditional venture capitalists want to see big returns. We live somewhere in the middle. Yeah. And they need to know that we're going to prioritize both of those things. But actually, I believe that's the perfect business model, because who wouldn't want to say they're doing good for the world? And eventually we could even monetize these social programs because there's carbon offsets there, and that's revenue. So if they actually looked at the big picture, it's really the perfect business model. And so we're, private equity, angels, getting people who are like-minded, who are coming in. That's kind of where we're looking now. But the conversation is always open. I mean, The numbers speak for themselves. When you look at the companies that have been doing this for a long time, they're multi-million-dollar companies. So there is money to be made in this product.
Yeah. Great.
Yeah.
When the going gets tough, and you mentioned like you have to be stubborn sometimes, but do you ever feel that you falter and you don't have the resolve to carry through? And how do you sort of re-energize yourself? Is it you go out and surf, or do you have any routines that keep you, non-negotiables that keep you sane every day?
I mean, you're right that entrepreneurship is hard. And I think, so I one of my side gigs is I teach. I love it. I've always, when I was younger, I did internships, and I always had mentors. And so since I've been in my professional career, every job I've ever had, I always have incoming interns. We just had 7 this summer from all over the world. And I think...
What are you teaching? Sorry.
I teach entrepreneurship.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And I'm doing a masterclass next Friday on sustainable business. So the future of sustainable business. And I think so many young people, they just want to be an entrepreneur. They just want to work for themselves. Like nobody wants traditional jobs anymore. Yeah. So that's kind of where I'm getting to here. And I try to slow them down. I'm like, I had the crummy jobs for many, many years before I did this. And I can promise you it's not glamorous. It's really hard. It's really, really hard work. There's money problems all the time. If you're not failing in one area, you're failing in another. And every single day, there's going to be another brick wall. So there's nothing easy about it. And the only trick is to get up every day and to keep going. Because if you give up, then it's done. So being a sustainable business is even harder, right? Because now you're reconciling all of these priorities. And again, it's the long game. So those returns aren't always up front. And so I think for me, I've just never found anything that's so aligned with who I am as a person. When it's hard, I'm like, man, I wouldn't be anywhere else. This is the coolest business. It's a cool product. We get to help people. We get to save people money. We get to make something beautiful. We get to work with local artists. We're reviving ancient traditions of ceramics industry that have been around for thousands of years in Indonesia. And that's all just going to get bigger and better. And we get to hire people who are like-minded, who love what they do. And then I get to surf at 7 o'clock in the morning, before I go into the office. So, man, I have no complaints.
Not a bad life. Surfing. The water is not that clean. Surfing. What about that?
It's tough. It's funny because we've had no paid for marketing in 5 years. And so this is part of the fundraise. We've got all this organic traction, word of mouth sales for 5 years. Like things are going well. One of the communities I've always wanted to get into is the surfing community because I surf and I know what it's like to swim around plastic water bottles. It's disgusting. And so that's on the to-do list, and we've got all the right contacts. We just need to make some phone calls, but there's nothing more real. You can walk down a beach and you can see the plastic, but you can walk right past it. But when you're on the water, like you can't walk past it. Like you can't push it away. It's just there. And then you start to look at the marine life. And I don't know if you've seen David Attenborough's new documentary, Ocean.
I haven't seen the new one.
I love him. He's incredible. I actually met him many years ago when I was at Cambridge. This was it's not his best film. He's made so many good ones. Yeah. But it's his last film. And it's the only one where I've seen him with this profound call to action. And because
he's been criticized before for not being vocal enough, and he's kind of changed the last few years. But
I think he's like, what, 98? So it just, and he's talking mostly about the fishing industry, but plastic is a huge part of that. So if we're drudging the oceans, we're breaking down coral, we're wiping out marine life with these big boats in the fishing industry, and then we're simultaneously choking them to death with plastic. It feels like there's no way forward. But he did conclude by saying that he was also hopeful that big government and multinationals are putting rules in place. And